When I think back to the day it all began, I can still hear the beeping machines and smell the antiseptic sting of the hospital air. My life had already been unraveling long before I met Dr. Evelyn Marlowe, but that meeting sealed a fate I never could have imagined. I was just an ordinary man with ordinary worries, work, bills, and the quiet loneliness that seemed to stretch through every part of my life. I had no idea that my body, my identity, everything I thought defined me, was about to be rewritten under the fluorescent glow of a surgeon's experiment. It started innocently, almost casually. I was in the waiting room, flipping through an old magazine, when a nurse called my name. I thought I was there for a routine checkup, but instead they led me to an office that looked more like a laboratory. Whiteboards filled with diagrams covered the walls, glass cabinets displayed strange instruments, and at the center stood Dr. Marlowe herself, a tall woman with sharp eyes that seemed to see more than you wanted her to. "You've been selected for a new clinical trial," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "A chance to be part of something revolutionary." I frowned. There must be some mistake. I didn't sign up for any. She cut me off with a small smile. "Sometimes the people most in need of change don't volunteer. They're chosen." Her words unsettled me. I should have walked out right then, but there was something magnetic about her presence, something that made it impossible to ignore. She explained that her research focused on reconditioning the body, reshaping not just muscles and features, but habits, instincts, even identity itself. Sounded like science fiction, the kind of thing you'd laugh off in a movie. But as she spoke, I noticed how serious she was, how every sentence seemed loaded with certainty. "Why me?" asked cautiously. Her eyes narrowed. "Because you're searching for something. You think you're hiding it, but I see it in your posture, in the way your eyes drift when you talk about yourself. You've been carrying a secret for years, and you don't even fully understand it yet." Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I had no great secret, or so I told myself. But her gaze cut straight through my defenses. She leaned forward. "My experiment doesn't just change the body. It reveals the truth." I laughed nervously, trying to deflect. "And what truth would that be?" "You'll see soon enough." The next thing I knew, she was handing me forms to sign. They looked official, stamped with logos and jargon I barely understood. My instincts screamed at me to walk away, but my hand trembled as I signed my name. Some part of me, buried deep, wanted to know what she meant. The first stage wasn't surgery. It was conditioning. They gave me a strict diet, strange exercises, and daily visits to the lab. First, it just felt like an intense health program. But within weeks, my body began to change in subtle ways. My skin softened, my face looked younger, and my reflection grew unfamiliar. I tried to brush it off as imagination, but then came the wardrobe tests. The staff handed me clothing, skirts, blouses, dresses. First I laughed, thinking it was some bizarre psychological study. But when I looked in the mirror I froze. The clothes didn't look ridiculous on me. They looked right in a way I couldn't explain. Dr. Marlowe watched carefully. "You see, the body remembers what the mind denies." I didn't answer, but inside, a storm was brewing. Every day I told myself I could stop, walk away, undo all of it. And yet every day I returned. Part of me feared what I was becoming, but another part feared losing it. It was only the beginning, but already I sensed the trap closing in. The surgeon wasn't just reshaping my body, she was reshaping my future. And deep down I wondered if maybe I had wanted this all along. The second phase of Dr. Marlowe's program began quietly, without fanfare, almost as though she wanted me to stumble into it without realizing how far I was being led. The diet grew stricter, the exercises more specific, and the evaluations shifted from mere observation to deliberate instruction. At first, I thought it was still physical conditioning, but soon I realized the surgeon's experiment had very little to do with health. It was about transformation, systematic, deliberate, and unstoppable. I remember one morning being handed a tray of pills. "Supplements," the nurse said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I stared at them suspiciously, their glossy coatings reflecting the sterile lights above. "What are these for?" "Yes. "They'll help your body adjust," she replied, her tone rehearsed. I hesitated, but Dr. Marlowe herself entered the room before I could protest. She gave me a look that was equal parts stern and reassuring. "You signed the forms," she said simply. "Do you trust me?" Trust. That word lingered like a weight. Against my better judgment, I swallowed the pills. Over the weeks that followed, the changes accelerated. My shoulders narrowed, my frame softened, and the mirror began to betray me more each day. My once angular jawline blurred into something gentler. Even the way I moved shifted. My steps lighter, my gestures unconsciously more fluid. The strangest part was how my mind kept struggling to catch up with my reflection. I would wake in the night, rush to the bathroom mirror, and stare at the unfamiliar softness staring back. I should have been horrified, but there was something magnetic about it, something that whispered this was the person buried inside all along. The clothing trials became mandatory. Each session, the staff would hand me new outfits. Skirts, fitted blouses, even heels. I stumbled at first, feeling ridiculous, but under Dr. Marlowe's sharp gaze, I adjusted. She never mocked me, never laughed. She only studied me like an artist watching a painting take shape. "You resist with your words," she told me one day as I stood awkwardly in a pale pink dress. "But not with your body. Notice how easily you adapt, how natural it looks. That's because your body has been waiting for this." I wanted to deny it, to shout at her for twisting me into something I hadn't chosen, but the words stuck in my throat. Because deep down a part of me agreed. The more I wore those clothes, the more they felt less like costumes and more like an unveiling. A mask was being stripped away piece by piece, and what lay underneath frightened and thrilled me. But there was another layer of fear I couldn't ignore. If this was only the second phase, what would the final phase demand of me? One evening after another long session, I lingered in the lab while the staff cleared up. I caught sight of a folder on Dr. Marlowe's desk, thick with papers and diagrams. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. My stomach dropped. There were charts documenting my progress, detailed notes on every physical change, even sketches of what I might look like months from now. At the top of the page was a phrase that made my blood run cold: projected female form. I froze, my hands shaking as I tried to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just about nudging me into dresses or changing how I carried myself. This was about rewriting me completely. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," Dr. Marlowe's voice cut through the silence. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Is this what you've been doing to me?" I stammered. She walked closer, her heels clicking softly against the floor. "This is what you agreed to. What you needed. You came here searching for answers, whether you admitted it or not. And I intend to give them to you." My chest tightened. "You're turning me into someone else." Her eyes softened, almost tender. "Not someone else. The person you were always meant to be." Her words echoed through me, colliding with every fear and every hidden longing I had tried to bury. For the first time I realized there was no turning back. The experiment had already gone too far, and so had I. The third stage was no longer subtle. Every trace of illusion or experimentation dissolved into something undeniable. My reflection was shifting so quickly now that I sometimes startled myself when passing a window or glancing at the polished surface of a steel tray. The man I remembered was receding, fading like a ghost in the distance, and in his place, someone else was emerging. Someone I both feared and strangely craved to see. Dr. Marlowe became more demanding. It wasn't enough to simply wear the clothes anymore. She introduced posture drills, voice lessons, and behavioral exercises. Each day, I was expected to practice walking with books balanced on my head, to rehearse speaking with a softer tone, to hold myself with grace instead of heaviness. At first, I resented it. I stumbled, I growled, I snapped at the nurses. But the more I practiced, the easier it became. Until one day I caught myself speaking in that softer voice naturally, without prompting. I froze, realizing it had slipped past me without effort. "Good," Dr. Marlowe said, observing me from across the room. Your body has already learned. Now your mind is following. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every step of the transformation so far. The softness in my face. The way my clothes draped differently now. The sound of my own voice, which no longer matched the one in my memories. It terrified me, but what haunted me most wasn't the fear. It was the growing sense of rightness. The next morning I was led into a new chamber, one I hadn't seen before. It looked less like a medical lab and more like a dressing room, walls lined with mirrors, racks of clothes, and shelves of cosmetics. At the center sat a vanity table with bright lights. "Today," Dr. Marlowe said, her voice measured but almost excited, "you will see yourself clearly for the first time." I sat down at the vanity reluctantly. A nurse began applying makeup with steady hands, foundation smoothing over my skin, eyeliner sharp as a whisper, lipstick painting a new mouth over the one I thought I knew. When she was finished, she stepped back without a word. I raised my eyes to the mirror. The reflection staring back was unrecognizable. The sharp edges of my past self were gone. In their place was a face that could belong to a stranger, or perhaps to a sister I never had. My chest tightened as I leaned closer, my hand lifting instinctively to touch the smooth cheek in the glass. "That's not me," I whispered, but the denial rang hollow. Dr. Marlowe rested her hand gently on my shoulder. "It is you. You've only been waiting for permission to see it." I couldn't look away. The reflection drew me in, a mixture of terror and awe pulling me apart inside. Part of me wanted to wipe the makeup away, to claw back to the man I used to be. But another part, stronger with each heartbeat, wanted to hold on to this new image, to let it settle into me as something real. From that day forward, the experiment no longer felt forced. It was as though my body had finally aligned with some hidden script. I walked more confidently in heels, I adjusted my posture without reminders, and I even caught myself smiling. Not out of compliance, but out of something like relief. Yet with each step forward came a heavier shadow of doubt. Who was I becoming? Was this truly me? Or was it only Dr. Marlowe's design, crafted in her sterile lab? One evening, after another long session of voice training, I stood alone in front of the mirror, the room silent except for my own breathing. I whispered my old name. It sounded foreign, ill-fitting. Then I whispered the name Dr. Marlowe had started calling me in her notes, a name I had seen scrawled across the diagrams in her folder. It rolled off my tongue with a frightening ease, like it had always been waiting. That was the moment I realized the experiment wasn't just changing how I looked. It was unraveling who I thought I was. The fourth stage began like a whisper but carried the weight of thunder. Dr. Marlowe called it integration. She said the body and mind were no longer separate experiments, they were one system now, adapting together, reshaping themselves into a single identity. I didn't understand the full meaning until the tests changed. Gone were the drills of posture and diction. Now I was asked to navigate entire scenarios. I had to walk into rooms filled with people, converse naturally, laugh, and react without slipping back into the old version of myself. At first, the nurses played the roles. Casual acquaintances, shopkeepers, friends. They would ask me simple questions, and I had to answer with the new voice, the new mannerisms, the new self. My responses wavered at the beginning. I hesitated. I stumbled. But each mistake only seemed to tighten the expectation around me, until eventually I stopped tripping over my old ways. Felt like acting. Only it wasn't. The strangest part was how easily it became second nature. My laughter softened, my movements became deliberate, graceful even. I noticed the subtle weight of hair brushing against my shoulders, the swish of skirts reminding me with each step that I was no longer moving through the world as before. Dr. Marlowe studied me with a keen, almost unsettling satisfaction. "You're not acting anymore," she told me one evening after another trial. "You're living." Her words echoed in my head long after she left. Living. Was this living? Or was it losing everything I once was? The experiment didn't stop at the physical or social. She began to test my emotions too. One day, she placed me in front of a mirror, the lights bright and unforgiving. She asked me to strip away the clothes, the makeup, everything she had provided, until I stood there raw and trembling. Then she asked a single question. "Who do you see?" The silence stretched on, heavy and unbearable. I searched the reflection for the man I had always been, but his outline had blurred. What I saw was not him, and yet not entirely a stranger either. I wanted to scream, to demand my old self back, but instead a different truth slipped out in a whisper I could hardly believe came from me. "I don't know anymore." Her eyes softened just for a moment. That's the beginning of honesty. That night, I sat in my room unable to shake the feeling that something inside me had cracked open. The more I tried to cling to my past, the more it slipped like sand through my fingers. And the terrifying part was, I wasn't sure if I truly wanted to hold on anymore. Days blurred into weeks. My reflection solidified into someone I could no longer dismiss. People around me, the nurses, the assistants, began to treat me differently, addressing me with gentle familiarity, smiling in ways that made me feel both exposed and oddly comforted. The experiment was no longer just happening to me. I was participating in it, feeding it, breathing it into existence. But with that participation came the weight of consequence. Each time I laughed in my new voice, each time I slipped into the clothes without hesitation, each time I caught myself standing taller not as the man I remembered but as someone else entirely, I felt a piece of my old self dissolving. One evening, Dr. Marlowe revealed something that shook me to my core. She told me the final stage was approaching, and once I crossed that threshold, there would be no way back. Not physically, not emotionally, not in any sense I could undo. "You must decide," she said, her voice calm but unyielding. "Will you step fully into this, or will you resist until the end?" I wanted to protest, to say I hadn't agreed to something permanent, but the words lodged in my throat. Deep down I knew the truth. Part of me had already stepped through that invisible doorway. As I lay awake in bed that night, my mind raced with memories of who I had been and visions of who I was becoming. For the first time, I realized that the final stage wasn't about what Dr. Marlowe wanted. It was about whether I could face the truth that perhaps this transformation was less of an experiment and more of a revelation. And the question that haunted me as I drifted into uneasy sleep was this: if I chose to complete it, would I still recognize the person I had become, or would I lose myself forever? The final stage came without fanfare, though it carried the weight of a lifetime. Dr. Marlowe didn't announce it with charts or speeches. Instead, one morning she entered the room with a simple gown folded neatly in her hands. It shimmered under the sterile lights of the lab, delicate yet commanding, the kind of garment that seemed designed not to be worn but to be embodied. She set it down before me and said only this: "If you put it on, you accept what you've become. No more half measures. No more questioning." My heart pounded so hard it felt as though the room itself could hear it. I wanted to demand more time, to ask for reassurance, but I knew instinctively there would be none. This was the end of the road. I picked up the gown with trembling hands. The fabric was softer than anything I had ever touched, smooth and flowing like water over my skin. As I slipped it over my shoulders, it seemed to mold itself to me, as though it had been waiting all along. When I caught sight of myself in the mirror, my breath caught in my throat. I didn't see the man I had been. I didn't even see someone halfway between. I saw completion. Dr. Marlowe's eyes gleamed with a strange pride, though there was no victory in her expression, only inevitability. "Do you see now?" she asked quietly. I couldn't speak at first. My throat tightened, my chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Then, almost against my will, the words came out in a voice that no longer felt borrowed. "Yes, I see." From that moment the lab became a stage. The assistants greeted me by the new name Dr. Marlowe had chosen for me, and though it wasn't mine, it no longer felt foreign. Each test from then on wasn't a trial but a demonstration. Walking, speaking, laughing, it flowed naturally without hesitation. It was as though the person I had been had dissolved completely, leaving only this final form. But with every step deeper into this new self, an ache settled in my chest. Late at night, when the lights dimmed and silence returned, I felt the ghost of the man I once was hovering in the corners of the room. His memories still lived inside me. His voice still whispered, asking if I had abandoned him or if he had simply outlived his place in the world. The night before the program ended, Dr. Marlowe visited me one last time. She sat across from me, her eyes softer than I had ever seen them. "You've gone further than I imagined. But this isn't my experiment anymore, it's your life. The question is, will you mourn what you lost or embrace what you've gained?" I thought of all the weeks of training, the mirrors, the tears, the moments of resistance, and the quiet acceptance that had grown inside me. And in that moment, I realized the answer wasn't simple. I could not erase the past, but I could no longer deny the present. "I'll embrace it," I whispered. She nodded once, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Then you are free." The program ended the next day. There was no dramatic farewell, no applause. Just a quiet walk out of the facility into the open air. For the first time in months, sunlight warmed my face, and I felt both lighter and heavier than I ever had before. As I moved forward, I knew I was stepping into a future that no longer belonged to the man who had walked into Dr. Marlowe's lab. That man had been transformed, reshaped not just in body but in soul. And while I could not fully answer who I was yet, I knew I was no longer trapped by uncertainty. I was living proof of the surgeon's experiment, yes, but also of my own resilience, my own capacity to adapt, to become. And as the wind caught the hem of the gown I still wore, I realized something that both comforted and unsettled me. The transformation wasn't just complete. It was forever,